Darkness kills, destroys the will. Find a spark, make hearts thrill. Hear the tales of time so grim. Shine a light, don't let it dim. Heather Brown downtown, bound. True crime story she's found. In the shadows, secret stay. Need a light that finds the way.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of Defeating the Darkness. True crime stories with downtown Heather Brown. That's me, your host. Happy New Year. I'm really excited to bring you this episode with someone I've known for a very long time, many years, who has recently written the greatest book I think I've ever read, at least in the past 10, 15 years. Sorry, well, Matt Murphy's Book of Murder was really good too, but this was a fascinating read. It's called Murder by Suicide, and he's here today with us on this episode to talk about his amazing work as a reporter in Orange County, California for 40-some plus years. And so welcome. Today with us is Larry Welborn, the former god of writing true crime stories in Orange County. Larry Welborn, welcome to this episode of my podcast.
Well, thank you for that great introduction and high praise. I'm glad you enjoyed the book.
I truly mean this wholeheartedly. I read the book because you were coming on the episode, and I was like, I have to read it so that we can have a meaningful discussion about it. And I got to tell you, last night, when I finished it, I was blown away at the ending. The ending was so fascinating. And I have my best friend in the whole world. Her name's Maureen Kirby. I know she's listening because she's a true friend and she listens to every episode. She loves reading true crime stories. Murder by Suicide, Wheezy. You got to read it. You're going to love it. Everybody else, you have to read it. When did you write this book?
Over the course of the last 50 years, I wrote it. I started writing it when I first heard about Linda Cummings' case. And I finished it about 4 years ago. Wow.
So when did it get published?
It published last year in June, and we had a book launch in downtown San at the Chapter 1 former restaurant, former bookstore. Tony Rackauckus was there.
Oh, I love Tony.
And Paul Meyer was there, and
love
a lot of your old friends were there.
Oh, I love it. So I didn't make it to the book signing. I did see on social media that you had written a book. And so when I saw it, I was like, I got to get his book because I knew it was going to be a great read. Now, you and I, we've known each other for 25 years.
Easily, yes.
Easily 20. Yeah, I started in 1998. So with the DA's office, and that's when we met. You were a reporter for Orange County Register.
I was on my third stint in the courthouse as the courthouse bureau chief for the Register, correct.
Wow. But you had been doing that for many years before I came along.
Well, I'd been there in three different times, in the 70s and in the 90s and in the 2000s. I came back as a senior reporter there.
Wow. So you had, since 1970, been covering the criminal court, basically murders and rapes or all the big sensational newsworthy cases in Orange County.
Yes, I have. I've covered every murder case in Orange County, or known about them since 1970. And I researched the ones back to the beginning of time. So if there's a famous murder case in Orange County, I knew about it.
Wow. You just have a wealth of knowledge about the crimes in Orange County.
Well, thank you.
Do you think that most people would be shocked to learn about how many murders there are here?
I think they would. I think they think of us as the nonviolent side of the Los Angeles area, but it's not true. We have unique and sensational and bizarre and torturous murder cases, just like any other place in the United States.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that you're spot on. It happens everywhere. It doesn't matter how affluent the neighborhood is. In fact, that actually sometimes entices people to murder you more when you have things that they want and they don't want to work hard for it. They'd rather take it from you in the middle of the night while you and your family are sleeping.
That's true. Or in broad daylight when you're in front of them and they have a gun on you. Yes, true.
Yeah, right? It can happen anywhere at any time. So we're lucky. We're lucky we haven't been murdered yet, huh, Larry?
I suppose.
Isn't it crazy, though? Do you think that having covered all those cases for so many years, that you have like a twisted sense of reality?
That's a great question. And I've asked myself that question many times, and I don't think so. I kind of separated my work from my private life. You probably didn't. You met my wife today, Manny?
I did. She's lovely.
Yes,
Hi,
we've been
Manny.
married for 50 years, and I don't think she knew about half the cases I covered. and I kind of separated my work and my home life, and I was successful doing that. So I don't have a twisted view personally, but I could see why people who deal in your line of work would be jaded about their experiences.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to at some point. I think you have to kind of separate it out and compartmentalize, you know, the darkness that you are reading and watching and writing about and listening to, and in your case, investigating, right?
How true. I mean, imagine going to cover the opening statements in the Randy Kraft case. And Randy Kraft killed 65 people, I'm pretty sure. He was charged in Orange County with killing 16. And the DA paraded 16 mugshots on the screen on opening statements. These are the 16 victims in Orange County. And you know that they were dead, and he described the horrible way in which they were killed. And then go home and have tacos with Annie. And that's a hard thing to think about when you think about all that inhumanity that's done to
the inhumanity. Yeah, and you have to go home, and when you have children, you have to play along, like, you know, play Uno with your kids. That's and right. Smile and laugh when you've just either watched or listened to some of the most gruesome facts ever known to man.
I can't even play Uno with my kids without thinking about the David Brown case, because the day they murdered Senator Brown's stepmother, they played Uno. So I think back about that when we play Uno with my kids and grandkids.
See?
Things kick back in here. Yeah.
They do. It's so funny. I want to get back to the Randy Kraft case, because that was Brian Brown who prosecuted that, right?
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, what a great, phenomenal attorney he was.
Oh, he was one of the best.
So you've gotten to watch the best.
I did.
Wow.
I watched the best. Back when I first started in 1970s, there wasn't even a homicide panel. So you have Jim Enright or Frank Rusino or Bob Chatterton trying homicide cases. And then slowly down, there was, 12 lawyers on the homicide panel now? Mm-hmm. I think all those, the best lawyers in the homicide and section divisions. And you've seen all the best prosecutors from the beginning of time.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's great. And you get front row seats?
I do.
Wow. I was so fascinated. So by reading your book, and just when you were mentioning all these cases like the Randy Kraft killer case, and for the listeners that don't know about that, Randy Kraft was a prolific serial killer who was murdering Marines and hitchhikers here in Orange County and Los Angeles County.
And other places as well. But I think he operated for 11 years without being caught. He was a very high IQ individual from Claremont Mud College, and he picked up hitchhikers or talked young men into his car, then slip them a Mickey and have his way with them in a very nice way. He
was brutally sexually assaulting them.
I don't want to talk about it. It's just,
it's too gruesome.
Yeah, what he did to Mark Howard Hall on New Year's Eve in 1979 is just incredible.
Yeah, it's
horrible.
It's too horrible to mention. Okay, so let's get to this horrible murder that we're going to talk about. Your book.
Let's talk about that book.
Yeah, let's talk about your book. Wow, it truly was fascinating. A fascinating read, and it's about a murder case. And tell us about the victim in this particular case.
The victim is one of those innocent people who just a Jane Doe running through society you don't pay attention to. Even in death, she didn't get any attention because the killer raped her, strangled her, and then he pretended that she killed herself. He put her up in a noose and spread rumors that she was suicidal and wanted to kill herself, and passed the whole experience off as I was her friend, and I found her body, and she killed herself. And the cops bought it, and it was just, she was anonymous in death as she was in life. But then he killed somebody else in the same apartment complex, and they made him good on that case, and they went back and looked at this case, but they never filed a murder case in the Linda Cummings case. They filed it in the second case. And I heard about it at that time, and I said, wait a minute, that doesn't seem like justice to me, and it didn't seem right to me, so I tried to find out why they didn't prosecute it, and I followed that case for 40 years until I got some kind of justice to it.
40 years.
More than 40, 46 years before we got some kind of redemption or justice for Linda Cummings.
Wow, that's crazy. And you were the reporter at the time.
I was. And
So you're not a detective. You're just a reporter who read about this, who learned about this case about Linda Cummings, and you thought, hey, and she was 27 years old at the time she was murdered.
right.
20.
I wasn't just a reporter. I was a good reporter.
No, I didn't mean just a reporter.
know.
I meant within the criminal justice system,
Right.
you weren't a detective, you weren't an investigator, but you were a reporter who arguably reporters aren't like, I understand investigative reporters do that. And were you like an investigative reporter?
I have done some investigative reporting in my career. I don't think we had an investigative team that I was a member of, but I did some investigating on this and other cases.
Okay.
But so I do, the ability to find public records is a key tool in any journalist's tool belt, particularly investigative journalists. So we found a lot of public records about this case. We were finding public records 40 years after the murder happened about the case that wasn't the case at the time. It wasn't even filed as a murder case. And then the ability to interview people and get information out of them, another key tool in a journalist's tool belt. And I use that to some degree of success, especially on this case. When we talked to the patrolman on the scene 45 years later.
Wow.
And he gave us information I didn't know existed that kind of tied all the loose ends together in a nice package.
Wow.
So those things are part of the things that journalists do. And I think because I was able to work on this book for such a long period of time, I acquired these skills that went along that allowed me to find the information that I was able to finish this book on. And that's part of the overall package.
Wow. And so when you are, just uncovering detail after detail, and you understand that the DA's office did not file the case against Linda Cummings, so there was no justice. And in fact, the coroner had actually ruled it from, the jump as a suicide.
Yes, the coroner did that. And usually he relied on the information from, not usually, but he relied on the information from the killer, who was the only person who claimed to know. She has no family. She has no friends. I'm her only person who knows her. And believe me, she was suicidal and depressed. And matter of fact, she just got out of the hospital for treatment for a mental disease. All that information gathered together, and the coroner made a snap decision and ruled it a suicide. And that haunted that case for 40 years.
That one decision, by that coroner. Is that coroner still alive?
No, he passed away.
Okay, so we can talk smack on him.
Yeah,
Terrible job. I don't even know his name. We don't even have to say his name, Larry, but boy, did he do a poor job on this one. But in his defense, wasn't he not a coroner who was accustomed to doing the criminal cases?
He was. The pathologist was not accustomed to doing criminal cases. He was a experienced coroner's investigator.
Oh, okay. I screwed that one up.
So the pathologist who automatic body autopsy on those bodies, and he didn't find anything that was contrary to what the evidence was presented to the coroner's office. And unfortunately, the killer was very smart. He had a high IQ, not very educated smart, but he had a high IQ, and he was able to convince. He was like a used car salesman.
Yeah, and so he was able at the scene, right? Because he's actually the one who called the police.
He did. He found the body, called the police. Yeah.
He finds the body, he calls the police and acts like, oh my gosh, my wife and I just, came up on our tenant who, we were friends with, we worked with her, and she hung herself. We found her hanging. And
That's right. And even though the body was found in I don't know how this could ever go as a suicide. She was lying on her bed, face forward, so gravity and pressure it was a method of death according to him. The rope was tied off on this side to a closet rod, and on this side to a door hinge, and she's in the middle with a non-slip knot. How can anybody get in that position with a non-slip knot and tied over here and tied over there? How could anybody buy that as a suicide? I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened either. And that is a crying shame that happens. And I've seen that. Obviously, you've seen it. It's not just this case where one fact at the beginning gets either misinterpreted, misunderstood, they just get it dead wrong. And it screws up an entire case.
That's right. It's like dominoes. It's the first domino, and you get it out of line, and then the other dominoes don't fall. But in this case, a domino did fall 7 weeks later when he killed the other woman in the same apartment complex, and claimed that she she was suffocated. She was also choked to death.
Yeah.
And she was kidnapped, and he was coming to rescue her. The kidnapper called him. It's just a total bullshit story.
He gave some crazy, bizarre story, right?
Yeah.
And the FBI was involved because it was a kidnapping.
The FBI came down there, and they called it FBI first. But he made in the ransom note, he knocked out on those little. He misspelled 2 words, and that afternoon the cops gave him a spelling test. He misspelled the same 2 words in the spelling test as he did on the ransom note.
We call that a clue. Okay, so
a red letter clue, because it was in red dynotape.
What was it?
It was in red dynotape, so it was a red letter clue.
Oh, red letter. Oh, he cut out the little letters like you see in the serial killer movies.
Classic, yeah.
Oh my gosh, he watched one too many TV shows, right?
So once that body, they had attached him to that dead person. They said, "Wait a minute, what about Linda in the same apartment complex?"
It was like 5 weeks later, right?
7 weeks later.
Oh,
yeah.
7 weeks later.
They reopened the case. Said, "Yeah, he did her." But how are they going to prosecute when your own coroner said it was a suicide? Mm-hmm. So they felt like they're going uphill against the wind, and they decided they wanted to prosecute on one case, a good solid case, not weaken it with a weak case. And I understand that decision. I just wish they would have come back afterwards and done something more with Linda's case.
Right. Like, okay, if you're not going to file on it right now, because I mean, with murder, the charge of murder, just so our listeners who don't know this, there is no statute of limitations.
No statute of limitations, that's right.
So if you think you're getting away with murder, we're coming for you, or the DA's offices.
That's right.
I forget I don't work there anymore. Kind of bums me out.
Yeah, you do the defense on a case.
Yes. Now,
would you take on a defense case on a murder case?
If I thought that the person didn't do it.
How did that happen?
Well, if I thought the person was innocent. Yeah. We get it wrong sometimes. The DA's office does get it wrong.
Once in a while, yeah.
Once in a while. I'd like to believe on any case, really. But, that's one thing I have learned is sometimes people, look at this case.
Sure.
The coroner got it wrong.
The coroner got it wrong.
Right? And in this case, it benefited the defendant. But there are people out there who are not good at their job, who don't know necessarily what they're doing. I would see that on sexual assault cases often. Well,
Would you see innocent people charged with sex crimes?
I didn't. But I was only really looking at my cases.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
When you're a DA, you're not really paying attention to everybody else's cases.
What I think what most of your listeners don't understand completely is that these aren't done just by, I'm going to charge that person. It's vetted through a committee of people in the sex crimes unit and their superiors and probably above them if it's a headlining case. Same with the homicide cases. I mean, there might be 20 people might look at that case before you file a homicide case in 2024 Orange County District Attorney's Office. So it's not just a decision made in a vacuum. It's very well thought out.
It is definitely a very well thought out decision. I agree. And sometimes people get upset when the DA doesn't file right away. But you have to understand, like, if our justice system's working properly, right, you want a prosecutor who's going to review all the evidence before making a decision. And They have to believe at that time that they file the charges that they can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And if you have someone who gets arrested and you have time period in which you have to file that case, right, or they get released. So if you have a guy who's accused of murder and the cops arrest him, it's not something that it takes 10 years to solve, okay? It's a immediate, we know who the perp is. You have to understand you have to file that case within, 48 hours. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they're out of custody. So if you have, 8 to 10 cops at the original crime scene interviewing people, and they're up all night long interviewing people, the time in which you have to review all those interviews is very, very limited. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So sometimes the devil's in the details, right? You have to really have the opportunity, I think, as a prosecutor, to have the time to really look at the evidence and look at it from both sides too. Both sides, because that's what our justice system's about.
I've seen several times that 48 hours goes by and they let the guy go and they'll rearrest him 10 days or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 10 years later when the evidence is developed in a proper fashion.
Right.
And they could have done this on Linda Cummings' case. They looked at it thoroughly and developed all the information that was available to them. But in this case, what people were upset about was the victim of the second case was the mother-in-law of the biggest contributor to political campaigns in California that year, and a wealthy benefactor and philanthropist who owned 2 hospitals. Well, they'll charge murder on that case with the spelling test, and they didn't file on Linda, who was a nobody, kind of a Jane Doe person.
Yeah.
They thought that the moneyed person got special attention and the unmoneyed person not. That was a big of interest in this book.
Yeah. Was that people didn't know who she was? She was in theory a nobody when she was anything but a nobody.
Not to me, she wasn't.
No, not to you and not to her family. I mean, and the background of Linda is in your book because you really delved into the details about her.
Sure did.
Okay, so let's get back to Linda. So Linda she was working as a nurse.
She's working as a nurse's aide, right?
As a nurse's aide in Santa Ana,
Right.
California, and had recently gotten a new apartment at this apartment complex.
It's their first day moving in, right? She's moving in her boxes and furniture and stuff, little knickknacks and stuff, right?
And she had just started a whole new life path for her life. She was going to go to, I think, college or business school, right?
Yeah, she really had a tough childhood. Her parents divorced and her mother died of cancer on Christmas Day.
Oh,
And her father couldn't handle it, and he left her to be raised by the foster care people. And then she'd had a tough time, and she moved out to California to be next to her father, and he still drank, and so she finally on her own. And she had a tough time, but finally she thought she was over the hill, and she's just going to start business school at Santa Ana College, and she's going to love her job as helping the people on hospice. She loved cheering people up who were in the last throes of their lives at Doctors Hospital in Santa Ana. And she got renewed with her stepbrother and half sister, and just to spend more time with them. Her life was on the upswing for Linda, and she was good to go. She was for the first time in life happy and content, and on the straight and narrow going forward.
so she was going forward, and her life was cut short by this murderer. Do we want to say his name or?
His name is Louis Wycheck. I don't mind saying his name. And
Okay. I mean, he's dead, so it's not like we're giving him any fame for being a horrible murderer, but he is. Louis Wychecky?
Louis Wycheck, right?
Wychecky.
And had such a good case in that second case. It's a great case that was tried by Frank Pusino as a DA. And he was a great DA. He was articulate, told good stories, a former Marine Corps colonel, and had all this great evidence. But he's also defended by one of the best defense lawyers I ever saw in Orange County, named Ron Butler. He was the public.
Ron Butler?
Yeah.
Yeah, I never knew of. I had never even heard of him.
He passed
until
away
your book.
before you came on the scene. He had cancer, and I don't know. I'm not sure when he passed away, but he was a great guy and a great lawyer. And he was just unassuming. You wouldn't know what he was doing. He was convincing you, but he was convincing you subtly. It was just so good. And he somehow got the jury to compromise on a voluntary manslaughter conviction for this guy that committed, in my mind, 2 counts of first-degree murder. And you think guys convicted of these heinous murders are just going to do a lot of time in prison. Louis Wycheck, he spent 3 years and 6 months in prison for killing Mrs. Morgan, and no
3
time
years
at all.
and 6 months in prison for killing a woman, Mrs. Morgan.
And and faking a
And
kidnapping.
he strangled her, right?
Right, hands on her neck, strangled her.
Yeah, he was. She was the apartment.
She was like a caretaker, I guess. I mean, she collected the checks. I mean, her stepson owned the apartment.
I see, and I think the evidence was that she had recently told him, like, "You're out, Louis."
He was going to be fired that day on March the 1st, 1974. He was going to be out, and he didn't. He didn't want to go.
He didn't like that news, so he strangled her and murdered her, and then made it look like she was kidnapped and all this kooky stuff. And
I think he drugged her first, so she didn't make much noise because she had the same kind of drugs that Linda had in her system.
that drug was Thorazine.
Thorazine, right?
Thorazine. So he drugged her with Thorazine, strangled her, and then I think
He wrapped her in a blanket that happened to belong to his wife, and disposed her in a vacant lot behind the apartment complex, and then called the FBI with this bogus kidnap story. He already typed out the kidnap note, the Dynatype tape thing. But it didn't take long.
Dynatype, is that what you're saying?
It's the plastic thing you punch makes indentations in the plastic.
Oh, yeah.
And
Like
then and he pastes all those on the lines of this paper.
And is that where he made the spelling errors?
Yes.
Was in the ransom note.
Right, in the ransom note.
Okay, so I have a question for you.
Sure.
This is a question I had after reading your book. So Louis goes to prison in San Quentin for 3 years and 6 months.
Yeah, right.
A pittance and ridiculous for murdering someone. And while he's in prison, he meets a gal. Okay, we got to talk about this.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that question. There is this group of people who belong to the Mensa Society,
but isn't that smart people?
Yeah.
How could he be a member of the Smart People Club and have spelling errors in his ransom note?
He claimed he was a member of Mensa.
Oh, he was
and
full
claimed
of
he
crap.
was tested at San Quentin and qualified a member of the top 2% of the IQ of people in America. Somehow I don't see San Quentin giving IQ tests to inmates. I kind of call bullshit on that. But he convinced his soon-to-be second wife that he was a member of Mensa, who, when she came visiting through the murderers at San Quentin prison with other members of Mensa, to cheer the boys up. Apparently, this Mensa Society wanted to go to prison and have a meaningful conversation.
And cheer the boys up?
Yeah, cheer the boys up in prison, the murderers.
Wow, that's crazy. That's one thing I don't understand is, like, I want to say arguably, if you meet someone who's been convicted of murder and you know them differently, but if you're in prison, like, that's not where I'm going to find
but
a husband.
No, but you're not a member of Mensa, and you weren't Sue. I don't know her if it made it Sue Whitechek even.
So she meets him and they get married.
They get married, and she had a little bit of money. So not only does he get out of prison, but he's lives in a nice house. His wife has some money. He doesn't have to work. He claimed he had training on computers in prison. That's why he got a job in the computer industry up in the Bay Area near Cupertino. But, there weren't very many computers in the 1970s, so I got to call bullshit on that too. I don't think he didn't have much of a job, so he's living in a nice house. His wife has money.
He's got a sugar mama.
Yeah, sugar mama. And apparently he had the gift of gab, and they got along well for a number of years.
That's crazy to me. So she marries him. They're married for a long time, but you are here in Orange County and you're covering all these other crazy murder cases and sexual assault cases. And we can talk about that in a minute because you used to cover my cases.
I did.
And very well, I might add.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'm glad you think so.
I do. You cleaned me up quite a few times in terms of my quotes that might have gotten me in trouble.
Although you are the best quotes person I've ever run across. You get some great quotes. Some I couldn't use, but yes.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I get in trouble when they use my quotes. We'll talk about that in a minute. I want to get back to Linda. So you are you're troubled by this case and the fact that Linda's murder was never brought to justice.
Yeah, it was. And I think I'm a bit naive about those types of things. I always thought, as growing up watching Superman and Dick Tracy on TV, that every murder was solved and they wouldn't let a murder just be forgotten. But nobody did anything after this case. The DAs thought it was murder, the cops thought it was murder, the sheriff's department thought it was murder. Everybody thought it was murder, but nobody did anything afterwards. I didn't understand that. So every time I ran across another detective from Santa Ana or a DA in the homicide division or anybody else that might be of interest in this case, I would run this scenario by them and see what they would think about it and see if there's anything that can be done. And everybody I ran it by thought it was a murder case, but very few people did anything about it. And I was kind of disappointed about that. And they said, well, there's not much we can do as the years go by, And,
it's even worse. As a prosecutor, you have a 30-year-old case.
And it's getting older every year. That's true. And some thought, well, maybe we could try this or try that, but they didn't have the energy to do that, or it's a good case, but it's hard to do. Until I ran into Larry Allen. One of the most courageous prosecutors in the DA's office. He's fantastic. Mm-hmm. He said, we got to do something about this.
Yeah, I love Larry Allen. He's a judge now. I've talked about him on previous episodes. His name has come up.
As it should.
Yeah, his name came up on the Gordon Cano case.
Yeah.
Stephen Gordon, did you watch that circus? Were you still
I was
working?
part of it. Kind of got tried after I left in 2014, but yeah, I talked to him about it as being followed. And what great work by the Anaheim police detective, just fantastic work.
Incredible work. So I had Detective Trapp on.
Oh,
She's amazing.
great work on that case.
Yeah, she did some, and that whole team, they did some incredible work. Darren
Yeah.
Wyatt's wonderful. So all these great detectives in Orange County that you've had the pleasure of working with over the years, as have I. And I was joking with Julissa about Larry Yellen because I didn't have a front row seat to the Stephen Gordon case because it was going on when I was in the sex unit. I wasn't paying attention to Larry's case. But then when I went into the homicide unit, I had the Cano case, his co-defendant.
Well, you had that case? Oh, good.
Yes, I had that case. And when Julissa was on the episode and she was talking about how Stephen Gordon had basically got up and, said he was guilty and, confessed to the jury and, everything about his confession. And then she tells me in the death penalty phase that he basically stands up and says, "Kill me. I want the death penalty." And so I was teasing that Larry, I'm like, Larry Yellen, that sounds like a cherry. You're right. So anyway, Larry Yellen's a great lawyer. He's a great judge. And he was the one that you convinced to take this case.
I didn't convince him. I was talking to him. I met him. I came back the days up to the court beat in 2001, I think, and I was new to the beat. And back when I first started, you met lawyers and prosecutors in bars after work. That's where you get the good stories.
You get them drunk,
yeah,
and then they start talking.
I just sat and listen. All you do is listen. You have to do anything, just listen. It's more important when you're doing an interview to listen rather than talk. So after I run all this up to people over the years, I must have got 20 people talk to saying, "What do we do about this?" And Larry was running. He was doing cold cases at the time. He was run by a cold case. It was just a phenomenal cold case about finding an eyelash at a murder scene and looking at it 15 years later, getting DNA off it and solving the case. I said, "Well, give me that exclusive, number one, and number two, let me tell you about this case." I ran it by him, I ran it by you, but a few more details. And he said, first thing he said was, "We got to do something about this." He, like I, felt personally affronted that this guy got away with murder and nobody did anything about it. And if he was going to try to do something about it, if he could. And he took the bull by the horn and through some creative thinking, smart thinking, and talking with other people, he convinced the coroner's office to reopen the case. And an incredible event went to Las Vegas to find a coroner's opinion from this Michael Bodden, one of the nation's most famous pathologists, that yes, there's a possibility we can find DNA if we exhume the body one more time. So we were able to exhume the body, and reporters used to go to exhumations, but I was there. They exhumed the body and looked for evidence. 30 years after the murder.
So that was like the second time her body had been exhumed.
Second time her body was exhumed because they exhumed it after Mrs. Morgan was killed 7 weeks later.
So once the second victim shows up, the police think, maybe Louis did kill Linda.
Took his body.
And so they exhume the body and they obtain evidence, but they still don't file the case, or they don't obtain evidence.
Sadly, because the murder was so effective in the way he talked to the murderers, to the police at the time, she was buried in a cheap county coffin, a wooden coffin that deteriorated in the ground over the years, and her body was just basically bones and hair. And obviously, you can't get any DNA from bones and hair, so from an assailant. So we struck out there, and I thought it was ball game over. There's nothing else we could do. But he found, in the process of that, a detective, Helen Moreno. You know Helen Moreno.
Helen Moreno, she's an amazing investigator.
Yes, well, she knew where the bodies were buried, so to speak, in the sheriff's office, because she was at the sheriff's department before that. And she went back. At the time, she was head of the Detective Bureau in the DA's office. Uh-huh. She went back to the sheriff's department and found a roll of negatives that were taken of that second autopsy. And the body was in more pristine condition then, and she blew up the pictures and they found abrasions on on Linda's neck that they were able to show to a different pathologist in the opine. Those aren't ligature strangulations. Those are from manual strangulation.
Manual strangulation.
With that, he felt they had enough evidence to file charges against Louis Wojcicki 31 years after the case. And he was arrested.
Wow. Okay, so tell us about this. So 31 years later,
because
Larry Yellen, a DA who cares, right, and thinks this is wrong. We cannot let Louis Wojcicki get away with murder. So he's opening up the investigation, this cold case.
Yeah,
and then
long odds against a lot of odds. Yeah, he opens it up and finds evidence that he feels, along with other things that I had covered over the time. I'd interviewed Louis' ex-wife in Kenosha. I flew to Kenosha, Wisconsin, interviewed her. Knocked on her door, a cold knock on her door in this miserable, bleak mobile home park in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And this enormous woman in a muumuu burst out smoking a cigarette. What do you want? I told her I'm Larry Welborn from the registrar. I'd like to talk to you about things that happened back in the Aladdin Apartments back in 1974. Can I ask you a few questions? He says, yes. Linda Cummings, she was my girlfriend and my husband killed her and I know it. I said, got the story. But she knew it like I knew it, with a few twists and turns I didn't know about. And it was a fantastic interview. Unfortunately, done in her miserable little single-wide apartment complex where she smoked one cigarette after another. It was unventilated and unair conditioned, and her parrots squawked the entire time I was there. But she did tell me that during 3 hours of the night in question when Linda was raped and murdered, Louis was answering phones for the fire department who were tired from fighting fires that day because there was a Santa Ana winter condition. Now, citizens off the street, especially with his record, don't answer phone calls for the fire department for 2 hours in the middle of the night. They don't let people do that. So with that evidence like that, Larry took some information from me and developed information on his own, and thought I had enough to file a murder case. He did file a murder case, and they went out to another thing, Heather. This is interesting. After he got out of prison, 3 years, 6 months for manslaughter, he changed his name. He didn't want people finding about his past or tracking him down in the future about like he did in the past. And number one, what he did in the past was kill Linda Cummings. Well, they tracked him down in Henderson, Nevada. And
with his new name.
The new name in a new house that his wife bought him on a golf course, and a real nice house that he should be on D board of San Quentin prison still, but he was living in this nice house in a golf course community in Savannah. So they're going to arrest him in I think it was November of 2005.
God, how do you remember all these dates and details and facts? It's fascinating. I can't remember what I ate for breakfast. And the fact that you can remember November 1970s, I'm just blown away.
Because I was there. One of the reasons I remember that. And
I was there at breakfast this morning too, Larry. I still don't remember. At least I think I was. No. I'm fascinated.
Well, my breakfast that day was a cup of coffee and a cookie. So I remember that day. But reporters usually don't go to murder arrests. We're not invited. Usually we're.
So how many years later is this?
31 years later, after the crime.
31 years later, Larry Yellen files the homicide case against him for the murder of Linda Cummings, and you get a entry ticket to go watch him get arrested.
Much to Helen Moreno's dismay, she didn't want me there.
She didn't want you.
She's in charge of the, and I understand that she was in charge of all it, and she didn't want anything to go wrong. And obviously, a reporter at the scene is always not good. But I got a tip that they were going to do this arrest, so I was kind of there that day.
Well, and I'm 100% confident that this meant a lot to you to watch that happen.
Well, it was a culmination of 31 years of my life trying to pin this murder down and get it tied up in a bow so I could write about it.
Yeah.
And it was an important day to see this happen. I mean, reporters don't get information just by listening to it or getting documents. They need to see things happen. And I was there to see Louis Wojcicki arrested and taken out in handcuffs. At first, I didn't think it was him because I hadn't seen him for 31 years. There was this skinny guy that looked like he was on crack in 1974. So this robust, round biker type in 2005, and I was on the same guy until he looked at me. And then I could tell it was his eyes that looked at me, and I remember that.
Really?
Yeah.
What was it? There was just something in his eyes.
Just dead eyes, just and with full of hate, and wasn't a very happy person at all.
You could see the evil in his eyes.
Yeah.
Wow.
I
It's
could-
crazy. You still remember it as you sit here today, huh?
I do. I remember every detail about it.
I know, it's clear. I'm like, I just read the book last night and I'm like, what year was that? Okay, so 31 years later,
Right.
you go out to Henderson, Nevada, to this house on the golf course, and it was quite an ordeal, right? They had like a SWAT team, and
It was great visuals for our photographer, whom I brought with me too. Watched the SWAT team swoop in and arrest him, put his hands behind his back, and had like a Hells Angels T-shirt on, or a biker T-shirt on. Maybe it was just an American T-shirt with riding up on his belly and looking at you. And then I interviewed his wife, and she said to me a great quote. Heather Brown-like qualities to the quote. She said, "I don't know what they have on him, but whatever it is, I hope they consider what the man he became." Because she thought he was, God's gift to women and the greatest husband that she could possibly have, and she thought he'd become a great person after all these things happened 2,000 years ago. She didn't say that he did those things. She said he told her about those, but she thought it was just a mixed up woman down in 1974 who committed suicide. But it was a great interview. I had some good quotes. I talked to his neighbors. They thought he was a great guy.
wow. And the wife said her, not end quote, because she asked you one more very important question,
Yeah,
right?
she did. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to talk about that.
Yeah, we will.
Okay. But the wife basically says to you, I hope they remember.
Yeah, I hope they whatever they have on him. I hope they take into account the good things and his good qualities that become all these years later.
Yeah.
That even if he did things, he's rehabilitated his life. It's in essence what she's trying to say, but in a more colloquial and personal way.
So do you think she knew that he had
She
murdered?
knew about this incident. She knew about this case. She told me directly that he had told her about it, and he said it was some mixed up, mentally ill person who committed suicide back when he was a younger man.
And Linda
couple-
Cummings was anything but a suicidal, mentally ill person.
I do not think so at all. She was not suicidal at all. She was a Catholic and would never consider committing suicide. She had a good rapport with all of her kids and all of her step nieces and nephews, and was starting to live a good productive life.
Wow, that's terrible. Well, there's so much more to break down about this in your book, and we haven't even gotten to what I found to be the most fascinating part. But right now we're out of time, so we're going to bring you back for our next episode so you can finish telling the listeners all about this story. Well, that's all the time we have for right now. And so we're going to have to check back in next time if you want to hear what happens when Larry Welborn goes to the arrest of Louis Wychecki for the murder of Linda Cummings. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime, if you can't find the light, be the light.
Be the light, shine so bright.